It's this line from Goethe. Der Feige droht nur, wo sicher ist. Means the coward only threatens when he feels secure.
I thought you didn't speak German. You learned German in the last year.
Well, I had to master all these documents. Irving had 40 years start on me, so I had to catch up.
Did you?
No.
Daniel, how are you doing?
Well, I've been thinking about Holocaust denial for a week, so I'm about normal, I guess. No, not really.
About standard.
This has been a rough. This has been a rough week. Thinking about the details of Holocaust denial actually is worse than most of the stuff I do these days. I was like, please give me Megyn Kelly, not more David Irving, please. That's something I thought I would say, but hey, that's where we are.
Yeah,
right.
Turns out there are some things worse even than Megyn Kelly, and
well,
I think that David Irving definitely qualifies.
Well, David Irving as an individual probably isn't. Like he's much less annoying than Megyn Kelly. But in terms of
I get the sense that in person David Irving is a real prick.
Well, I think we're going to discuss that in more detail. So we did kind of cover Irving before in a previous episode, which we will link to below. I did not re-listen to that episode, but anyway, so
before we get on to the main subject, though, we kind of feel like we ought to address the gigantic rampaging elephant that was in the room for pretty much everybody talking about politics. The last, as usual, we're late to it, but you don't come to us for hot off the presses topical discussion.
No,
which I'm of course talking about the Sydney Sweeney jeans ad.
I mean, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. I grew up on the Guess ads and the, like the Anna Nicole Smith and Pamela Anderson and all this cheesecake stuff. And I heard there was a controversy over like a racist, Sydney Sweeney ad. I mean, Sweeney ad for American Eagle for this jeans company. And I was like, all right, I want to look at this for myself. And so I sat down, I popped into YouTube, I put it in, I watched like a 30-second ad and I'm like, all right, that's annoying, but whatever. That was kind of my immediate response. It turned out I saw, because I didn't realize there were like 6 of them. I thought it was just like one, but no, it's an online ad campaign. And so there were a bunch of them. And I happened to watch like the least offensive one, and then I watched some of the other ones and I'm like, no, this feels a little more nasty than I was originally thinking it was. And then it's funny because it's like not even like the right wing like hacked onto this as a big story they could spin for weeks, because like some lefties on Twitter and Blue Sky were having what is, I think, a fairly reasonable conversation about like the use of like eugenic language in terms of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman having good genes, etc. I don't know. I think obviously the right-wing backlash is like out of like pure bad faith in terms of what any mainstream person was doing with this.
I feel like I did pretty much the same thing. I sort of saw it come up on the feed and I thought, I'm not interested. And it kept on going. And mainly what I was seeing was people joking about it, laughing about it, being ironic, taking the piss out of the idea that taking the piss either about people being upset about it or about the idea that people were upset about it. Right. So I thought, okay, well, I'll go and see what this is about. And I went to YouTube and I found a video of Sydney Sweeney doing, sort of the sexy voice and the sexy body language thing that
it's clearly taken from those like 90s Guess ads and all that stuff. I don't know how pervasive that was over on your side of the pond, but they were doing this in the early 90s. They had like cheesecake gene ads. It was all over the place for like 5 years in my teenage years. So,
well, the thing about the advert was that I just thought, well, this isn't anything unusual. This is just normal stuff.
Right.
There's nothing here that's the slightest bit unusual. Either the sort of the cheesecake objectification, or the using sex to try to sell a product in an advert, or even the stuff about genes. I thought, what is it? It amounts to her saying, I've got good genes, or I've got blue genes, or something. That's, it's kind of like a lot of adverts. It's just kind of stupid and annoying. I don't even understand what I'm supposed to think is happening in it.
I think it's also worth. How often do you watch ads, Jack? Like, what's your?
I don't. Well, I have very low tolerance for ads, partly because I don't watch very much television. I don't have the TV on. I seek things out. If I hear about things that I want to watch, I seek them out and I obtain them
Yes.
without subjecting myself to television. So I really don't see very many ads at all. So I think over the years, my tolerance for them has come down to a bare minimum, because basically I see a TV ad now and I'm just instantly furious at it.
Yeah. So I pay for YouTube Premium precisely so I don't have to watch the fucking ads.
So do I. So do I.
Yes, I will pay money to the evil Google corporation so that I don't have to watch the American Eagle ad. So I think there's also the thing that just, you and I are just not not poised in a place where we just see ads all the time. And so this is just, but anyway, I think that might be a factor in just the way the two of us approached it anyway. But yeah.
And I have to say that at 49, I don't feel like Sydney Sweeney has any meaning for me anymore. I can tell sort of in a theoretical way that that's a very attractive young woman, but that doesn't have anything to do with me at this point. That's just like, yeah. But the thing that I found interesting about it, firstly, was it's a quote unquote controversy. Well, it's not. That's the point. It's a fake controversy.
Yeah.
And it's been completely ginned up by the right. And the way they've done it is because they've sort of attached this semiotic thing to Sydney Sweeney, presumably because she looks like a fucking Valkyrie,
Yes.
And they've attached all this sort of freight or baggage to the idea of Sydney Sweeney. She supposedly, she supposedly sends people like us into a fury because she exists and people find her attractive. I suppose the idea is that woke people or left-wing people deny the existence of attractiveness. I don't know what these people...
Or like because she's white and blonde and conventionally attractive, because that's what people are angry at, because she's conventionally very attractive. And it's like, no, I've been on the left for a long time. I've been in a lot of lefty spaces. It turns out that lefty people have a lot of sex. It's fine.
Yeah. But I suppose it's because and I don't know to what extent American, the name is a bit of a giveaway. I think American Eagle jeans, which I'd never heard of before this. So I suppose their marketing department scored a coup there.
Yeah, they've also been known to do more jeans. I watched some videos about this just from other content creators, that they do have a history of doing jeans for people who are otherwise underrepresented. So people with like kind of, bodies with like shorter legs and like bigger asses, and that's, like where it's, deliberately going out there and like marketing their products to people who don't look like Sydney Sweeney. Let's put it that way,
Okay, well, that's interesting. That's not.
They also have a history in their advertising of doing like, people of all shapes and sizes. Let's just put it that way.
That's interesting, because that's not what I expected. So that makes me more puzzled about what's going on here, because it seems like a deliberate thing to choose this particular actress with all this freight attached to her from the right wing, and also to do this kind of play on good jeans. That's a bit odd.
This is where something that I've been hearing from the right wing and a little bit from left here. So again, I put less than an hour into this all told, except for just in my daily listening, because all these right wing dipshits had nothing to talk about except for Sydney Sweeney's ass for 3 days. The real criticism and the real thing that I think is probably true is that American Eagle they're seeing the writing on the wall in this kind of new Trump era and going like, well, we gotta court the Charlie Kirk fans a little bit more. We've got to and I mean, just for pure harsh business numbers, they just read the writing on the wall and going like, well, we need to attract a more right wing audience. So this is a way to do that. And
that's depressing. It indicates that we're leaving the admittedly very imperfect era of woke brands and entering into the even worse era of Vogue brands.
yes. I like that. Yes, no. I think that's the most interesting thing about it. I think that's just true now. And we see that, Target not putting out, not doing a big like Pride Month celebration thing. It's like, the right wing backlash has worked. The right wing backlash has worked.
Yeah,
it was always cynical. It was always cynical. It was just something, but it has worked at the thing. The corporations have learned the lesson that they were being taught, and that is to not be woke. Sorry, not that they were really particularly woke to begin with, but you know what I mean,
Yeah, to change the marketing so that it's ideologically acceptable to the people who now seem to be in the ascendant. Yeah,
yes,
but and which is. In its way, this silly, frivolous story is indicative of something very depressing that's happening across American society, and to a lesser extent, because we're a bit behind you on the same road in British society, which is the, complying in advance and the capitulation of institutions, be they educational or political or journalistic or commercial, across the board, just like dominoes, just complying and capitulating across the board. So Yeah.
Oh, I think the Domino's guy was probably a racist. I think that was just, anyway. I don't think that was compliance. I think that was, anyway. I'm not trying to get sued here, but I said I think.
But
I said I think. It's okay.
He said he thinks. It's allegedly. Yeah.
The libel laws are very different than the US and the UK. We will cover that shortly. But anyway, continue.
Yes, we will. The thing a couple of things to say before we move off this very silly topic.
Yeah.
It is a ginned up controversy. The idea being that the left or the woke or whoever, that whatever they call people that aren't them now, basically, were upset about this advert. Now, I didn't see any of that personally. I follow an awful lot of left-wing people on Blue Sky. I didn't see a single person really saying, this advert amounts to eugenics or anything. I saw people criticizing it, but that's all. And as I think has now been revealed in a newspaper article, which analyzed the analytics, people simply were not talking about these ads. Maybe a couple of people on the left were saying, this is eugenics language, which it kind of is.
I mean, it is, yeah. I mean,
it only took off as a quote unquote controversy after the right started to talk about how the left were having a meltdown about it, which is the pattern that we've seen again and again and again and again. And even then, from what I've seen, the vast majority of the quote unquote left discourse about this has been, it's a bad ad, but look at what the right are doing. Look at what the right are saying about it, etc., etc. The other thing I want to say about this is that, yes, this advert partakes of what is essentially a eugenics discourse. That is endemic in our culture industries. That is everywhere. I am begrudgingly coming to the end of a watch of the television series Picard, which is sort of picking up what happens to Jean-Luc Picard 20 years later. I'm in the third season now. The entire, don't worry, no spoilers.
Everybody who wants to see it is already seen it. It's fine.
And if you haven't seen it, don't. Honestly, I don't even know why I'm watching it. But the entire plot of the third series hinges at the individual particular level and at the macro level, the sort of race essentialist species level, which is built into Star Trek anyway, on the idea of people having particular personality traits because of their genes. The entire thing. And being good or bad because of their genes. This is everywhere. It's everywhere in science fiction. It's everywhere in fantasy, which are the dominant modes in pop culture. It's everywhere in true crime. Every other true crime documentary is called Born Evil. This is not... It's not that the advert isn't partaking of a eugenics discourse. It is. It's that our entire cultural production partakes of that same discourse all the time.
Yeah, I mean, this is a little more on the nose about it, but yeah, and no, I agree. How could I not?
Okay. That's basically all I wanted to say about it.
I have two other very brief points to make. I will make them in less than a minute so we can move off of this. I'm not talking about genes anymore. Certainly not in this episode. So, two things that I think Sydney Sweeney has a history of doing these kinds of things. She sold like bathwater stuff. She's done other advertisements that kind of prey on the male gaze. Like she sold like her bathwater in a soap at one point, like a limited edition soap.
It did come out that she's a registered Republican as well.
That was one thing. Yes, she is a registered Republican. The other
makes
thing,
her in 2025, that makes her a fascist. So
I mean, pretty much, yeah. Also, I found out I was perusing her Wikipedia page, as you do. I'm going to talk about this. Let's peruse her Wikipedia page just to get the basics.
Purely for research purposes, yeah.
Purely for, I have other tabs for the other things I might want to think about Sydney Sweeney. I'm fine. Don't worry. Actually, she is not. It's fine. It's fine.
When it comes to this sort of thing, Sydney Sweeney is so vanilla, No,
believe me. I have much more interesting people to think about in that terms than Sydney Sweeney. Anyway, the other thing is, and this is the burn her at the stake moment, ironically, not literally. She was born and raised in the panhandle of North Idaho. That area is a Nazi hotbed.
It is, yeah.
It is, very much so. Randy Weaver's compound was up there. Very close.
Aryan Nations.
And she grew up in that area, and so it is entirely possible that she has some Nazi tinges to her political beliefs, even if she is not a full-on white nationalist herself. So. I just grew up in North Idaho. And I'm like, she's a Nazi. God damn you! I caught you.
Damning evidence, indeed.
Yeah, damning evidence. Everybody who grew up in North Idaho was a fucking Nazi. Not the case at all. There are great anti-fascist groups working out of North Idaho. But as they did this with Taylor Swift back in the day. You remember white nationalists were like, and they did this with Taylor Swift. And I was telling this to my wife. I was kind of telling this story. It's like, just casually, like, like the right wing kind of like pretends that they've been using like Taylor Swift's like app to like share Nazi memes and stuff, and it's like, why are they using Taylor Swift? It's like, well, she's blonde, she's blue hair, she's blonde, blue, she has blonde eyes and blue hair. That's what I'm trying to say. She's conventionally attractive. She kind of looks like an Aryan goddess, and she's never like said anything about it, And my wife just went, ew. And I'm like, yeah, that's all she has to say. All she has to do is say the word ew in public in this topic. And I would just totally believe that she does not follow these things. And then later on she did. So, we're fine. But to my knowledge, Sydney Sweeney has not like said anything at all about this topic, which kind of makes me think, anyway, we've already gone on too long about this. If you want more, we could do a full episode on this. I really don't want to. I'm going to just stop talking about this. If we were going to do it, I would bring it into context with all those 90s ads. That's what I would do.
Yeah. So one more thing I wanted to say before we move on to the main topic, because apparently I still haven't made myself clear on this issue from feedback that I've had.
Okay.
Perfectly civil feedback, by the way.
Yeah.
The ADL, yes, I agree. Don't cite them. I agree.
Okay.
Do not cite the ADL. Okay, done. So let's move on to the main.
I think it's very funny that you get this feedback and I don't. Maybe you're just more active on Blue Sky. I think that's probably the case. I should really be getting. I get it sometimes, but it seems like you get it a lot more. Anyway,
I think it's because people trust me less than they trust you on these issues, and that's fine. I'm getting told stuff I need to hear, so that's good.
Okay, well, if I do things that are problematic, you can reach out to me. It's fine. I do check my Blue Sky. I'm just not on it as much. I do other things with my free time these days. But anyway, okay. That aside, main topic. Let's go.
Yes. So on to the main topic of the episode, which is, well, the original plan, as I understand it, was for us to do something nice and easy to bridge a bit of a gap. So, Daniel, you suggested that we talk about the 2016 film Denial, which is a dramatization by David Hare of the American scholar Deborah Lipstadt's own book, which I can't remember what it's called, but she wrote this
Denying
about
the Holocaust. It's called Denying the Holocaust.
No, that's the original. That's the book that Irving sued her over. She wrote another book about the trial.
No, the book is History on Trial. So
History on Trial, that's right.
Yes.
And Hare adapted that book into the screenplay, which became the film Denial. It's about the occasion it started in 1995. The process from Irving, the book being published, Lipstadt's book, Denying the Holocaust, in which she says perfectly correctly that David Irving is a very influential falsifier of history about the Third Reich and has connections with neo-Nazis. He sues her and Penguin Books, which published that book. It takes 5 years, 2000, to get to a British court. He sues in Britain because British libel laws are insane. Basically, if somebody sues you for libel, you have to prove that you didn't do it.
This will be a topic we have to cover down the. But yes, continue. Yes.
Well, when I say insane, what I mean is that they're insane for 99% of us. They're perfectly sane from the point of view of rich and powerful people, because that's what they're designed to protect, rich and powerful people from criticism.
Exactly.
In this instance, they laid a perfectly innocent, at least of libel, scholar and her publishers open to an aggressive, frivolous, potentially damaging lawsuit from a Holocaust-denying neo-fascist, David Irving, who pretended to be a historian, and it ended up in court in the year 2000. And it's a seminal moment in these issues, certainly a seminal moment in David Irving's career. He lost big after the defense mounted an incredible case where they got a professor, Robert Jan van Pelt, who's the world expert on Auschwitz. They got Professor Richard J. Evans, who's one of the world's foremost experts on the Third Reich. They got Peter Longerich, the excellent German Third Reich historian. They got all these people in to write, and they basically demolished Irving's contentions and his career in the process, because certainly Evans, in his analysis of Irving's work, demonstrated that Irving was a falsifier of the history of the Third Reich. He lost the case, had to pay all the damages, etc., etc. And the film is about that. So you wanted to talk about that film, and when you mentioned it, I said, well, there's a dramatization, a drama documentary
Yes.
from the year
Yes,
2000,
yes.
which I watched again. We were talking in the last bonus episode about me watching the BBC television film of Copenhagen at the time. This is another thing I watched at the time.
I might have seen this one.
I was
This aired on Nova in the US, and I was an active watcher of Nova at that time. So I may have seen this. But I wasn't interested in the topic at the time, so I didn't, it didn't stick into my brain. But at that time, I think I would have already seen Mr. Death. And Mr. Death is like one of my all-time favorite movies. It's certainly my favorite movie about this topic. So I don't know, maybe I missed it, but like it's entirely possible it passed across my consciousness at some point and I just never thought of it again. But yeah. Anyway,
but this was, it was hugely influential for me. As I say, I watched it at the time on Channel 4 in the year 2000. They taped it. I had it on VHS for many years, watched it many times. And that is a documentary stroke dramatization of just sections from the trial transcript.
Right.
And so I watched the movie Denial and you watched the television drama documentary Holocaust on Trial.
Sure.
And but it turned out to be the episode has turned out to be a bit more complicated than just an episode where we talk about these two dramas, hasn't it?
Yeah, let's talk about a movie. That's it's so easy. Let's just do a Marvel movie next time. Let's we need a little bit of filler. Let's cover Captain America again. Why not? It's fine. Certainly no like lurking presence of political subculture underneath the Marvel cinema universe. Jesus Christ.
Good Lord,
anyway,
there's no sociobiology or eugenics in any of those movies.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on a minute.
Hang on a minute. They're all over those fucking movies. Anyway, yes, continue.
So I don't know. Do you want to talk about these two dramas a little bit before we get into the main?
No. I do want to discuss this. So so I know I think you said something to the effect of I despise the 2016 film. And I don't know. I'm lukewarm on it. I did really like Holocaust on Trial. If it was my first watch, I did really enjoy it. I think there are things that the 2016 film does that I wish that the documentary did, namely kind of emphasize exactly how horrifying the libel laws in Britain are on these topics. And just how like absurd it is. The absurdly high bar that they had to reach in order to succeed at this. And that's something that the 2016 film does. It does it well in the sense that it emphasizes it because it's a Hollywood movie and it does it, but it also chooses the very wrong viewpoint character and gives us some really skewed decisions in terms of the way they choose to tell the story. And so, but yeah, no, I'll just say I really like Tom Wilkinson. I like him in everything. I first saw him in the bedroom. In the bedroom, not in the bedroom. He wasn't in my bedroom, but I saw him in the bedroom. That would have been in like 2001 or something like that. And then he was actually in an HBO movie called Normal, in which he is a 50-year-old man who transitions. He does a gender transition. This is 2003, and he's brilliant in it. It's a very well acted. It's a very well understood. I haven't seen it in 20 years, but I'd be willing to bet that holds up even to 2025 standards. It's really, really fucking good. And I've just always loved Tom Wilkinson things. I mean, obviously he's in Batman, he's in a whole bunch of other stuff, but he should have been the lead character here. Like ultimately the problem is this movie, the trial isn't about Deborah Lipstadt. I mean, it is about but it's the drama, the story that we're going through is not about Deborah Lipstadt. It's about, it's about Richard Rampton, the solicitor,
Yeah.
Sorry, which one is barrister and which is solicitor? I can never keep track of it. I think he's the barrister, right?
Yes, he's the barrister or the QC. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Anthony Julius, the solicitor, is played by, I think his name's Andrew Scott.
Andrew Scott, yes.
In the film, yeah.
Yes.
No, in Britain you have a solicitor and you also have a barrister or a QC who actually argues the case in court. Yeah. So Richard Rampton, played by Tom Wilkinson here, is the barrister or QC.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I first saw Tom Wilkinson in the mid-90s BBC adaptation of the Dickens novel Martin Chuzzlewit, in which he plays Seth Pecksniff, and he's absolutely brilliant in that. He's hilarious in that.
I believe it.
I've loved him ever since
brilliant. He's always brilliant. I just love him. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but I mean, he
died a couple of years ago, yeah.
Yeah. He's legitimately one of my favorite actors of all time. So
the movie also has a quite good performance, I think, by Tim Spall as Irving.
Yes.
I think a little bit too sort of overtly villainous at times, maybe. But
I think there's a conversation to have there. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from. Yeah.
Yeah, but as you say, I mean, the problem with the movie is that it sort of focuses on a I'm pretty sure heavily fictionalized version of the scholar Deborah Lipstadt, who, the story isn't about her. And as you say, dramatically, it should be about this QC.
Yeah, or it should be about the case. It should be about almost anyone else. Even Irving. There is a twisted version of this. You could make this about Irving. You could do like a like Oliver Stone's Nixon version of we're watching this man. We're looking at him. Tell these lies and be confronted by them in court. I mean, I think there's a really compelling case for that being a really good story. That would be really fucking difficult to do, but
But I'm afraid
let's get Werner Herzog in for that one. That sounds good.
The film struggles, I think, with dramatizing these events, and it has to manufacture loads of spurious conflict on between Lipstadt and her team of lawyers and so on, and other people, and it's just, I don't know, it just feels deeply unconvincing and pointless and irritating to me almost all the way through. When the film focuses on the stuff that's of interest, and both the film and the television docudrama, they have scenes in common, so to speak, because they both have scenes which are drawn directly from the actual trial transcripts.
Yep.
So you get dialogue in both, which is almost exactly the same because it's the transcript of the actual trial.
In preparation for the trial, the defense has had access to all of Irving's private diaries, compiled over a 40-year period. They are able to make use of some of this material in their cross-examination.
This is Irving in his diary speaking to Irving. This is not Irving punting some thesis about Jewish culpability to a television audience. Quiet evening at home, etc., etc. Jessica. Who is Jessica?
My little infant child.
Yes?
Well, she was 9 months old at this time.
A quiet evening at home. Jessica. Who is Jessica?
My little infant child.
Yes.
She was 9 months old.
9 months old in September 1994.
9 months old in September 1994. Jessica is turning into a fine little lady. She sits very upright on an ordinary chair. Her strong back muscles are a product of our regular walks in my arms to the bank, etc., etc. On those walks, we sing the Binkety Bankety Bong song. And, more scurrilously, when half-breed children are wheeled past, and then you go into italics. I am a baby Aryan, not Jewish or sectarian. I have no plans to marry an ape or a Rastafarian.
Racist, Mr. Irving? Anti-Semitic, Mr. Irving?
I don't think so.
Teaching your little child this kind of poison?
Racist, Mr. Irving. Anti-Semitic, Mr. Irving, yes?
I do not think so.
Teaching your little child this kind of poison.
Do you think a 9-month-old can understand words spoken in English or any other language?
When it focuses in on that, instead of doing its sort of Hollywood thing where they all travel to the Auschwitz camp and you get loads of sentimental stuff, and Lipstadt's character, the fictional version of Lipstadt, is depicted as sort of flying into a rage because everybody isn't instantly agreeing. It's actually quite a nasty portrayal, I think. It makes her look like a sort of a bad-tempered, intolerant shrew. Whereas, as I mentioned, the historian Richard Evans, who wrote a brilliant book about the trial, in which he then represented his own research demolishing Irving's work. The book is called Lying About Hitler. Yep. In that book, he describes Deborah Lipstadt as relentlessly positive and upbeat all the way through the entire thing. So, the version that we get in the film is just needlessly over dramatized. Yeah, but when it's not doing that and focuses in,
we're going to talk a bit about Deborah Lipstadt here in a minute. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay.
She has committed some sins. Let's just put it that way. But
Denying the Holocaust is a good book. I read it for the first time the first time we talked about this, back when we talked about Holocaust denial, because we talked about Mr. Death, and then we talked about this trial a little bit in those earlier episodes. And I went back and I did actually read the book, the original book, Denying the Holocaust. And I went in not expecting to like it, because Deborah Lipstadt's politics and my own are quite different. But it is actually, it's a good book, I think. Denying the Holocaust is a good book.
The one thing that she's, and we'll just do it here because it's we're talking about it, so it's fine. Well, it has to be said. In 2019 or 2020, when we did those first two episodes, Deborah Lipstadt, the claim was in certain quarters that she deliberately sort of elided the crimes of Israel, or in terms of like treated Israel as like a special project, and like that Israel could not commit genocide. That Israel obviously is not doing, and like, was not like speaking accurately in terms of the actions of the state of Israel on the Palestinians in general. And that there are some spurious things that you can find in Denying the Holocaust. You and I read Denying the Holocaust. I think we went through those exact pages together and came to the conclusion that we did not think that was an accurate characterization. That Lipstadt, regardless of her like personal opinions, that book does not go there.
No, it doesn't.
Lipstadt has, even at the time, she has made a lot of comments on, to the effect of, the actual Holocaust. The Holocaust was a different kind of genocide, that it was unique in its own way, and that of course we need to pay attention to all these other genocides as well, but the Holocaust was unique. And I think I agree with that, the scale of it, the speed of it,
yes,
but
I do too. To my own surprise, I believe that,
Yes. I mean, there are other genocides, in Lipstadt up until a certain day in October 2023 was always very careful on these issues, at least in terms of, I don't pay a ton of attention to her, but at least, and since then she's really gone off the deep end on this. And I think now she is actually engaging in racist behavior towards Gazans. And she's not a Douglas Murray, she's not a Sam Harris, she's not a Benjamin Netanyahu, but she has tipped over that line significantly. I mean, I don't have an exact quote from her, but I have seen enough to know that she is, it is one of those things of October 7th really threw some people's brains into the blender, and hers was one of them. And, it's just really disappointing because, as much as you and I would disagree with her politics on a lot of other things, she was actually pretty good on that topic, and now she is not. So it's just disgusting. I mean, it is one of those things. We're going to talk about this in more detail shortly, but, it is astonishing to me that anybody who studies the Holocaust, that anybody that and who is of an ethnic group in which this was done to you, would not see what's happening in Gaza for what it is. That's just, it baffles my mind. It has to be like selective blindness. Anyway, Denying the Holocaust is a great book. I read it for the first time in my early 20s. I reread it. I've reread it 5 or 6 times since. I did not reread it for this podcast, but it is a great book. For what it is a great primer on this kind of material. It's almost as good as anything you can find even now. Accurate up to the time, but Lipstadt is kind of doing monstrous things. That's all I'll say.
Yes. But, she is now an apologist for the genocide that the state of Israel is currently in the process of committing with the collusion of your state and mine.
Yes, absolutely.
In Gaza. And that is indefensible. Yes.
Yes. Especially for someone who is as educated and knowledgeable as she is on these topics. Especially for someone like Deborah Lipstadt. It's unconscionable. Anyway.
Yes. Okay, well, I don't really know that I have much more to say about the films. I really like the TV dramatization of the trial, and the documentary elements in it are very good as well. Certainly as an introductory thing, it's a documentary. Even now, I would sort of say, if you've got a young person, not a very young person, but a young person, you want to kind of they're interested and you want to start them on this topic. You could do a lot worse than starting with this, with some warnings in advance. Starting with this as a sort of an introduction to this subject. It's very good indeed. The movie, I think it's too hammy and over dramatized and I don't like it.
Sure.
That's basically what I have to say about it.
I have more tolerance for that kind of thing than you do. I think that's just true about both of us. But I think we agree on the specifics of what it does right, what it does wrong, and so it's fine. So do or do not see these movies if you care to. So why are we doing this? Why did I light upon this topic as something? Why did it click in my head like, oh, let's do a casual movie episode about Holocaust tonight? Oh, well, David Irving is still alive.
Yeah. Despite false reports, I think last year that he died, he is still hanging on. He is very ill, apparently. But
from what I gather, he's having health issues, and I do not believe in a hell, and I do not believe in torture but certainly I will look forward to the day when he is already in hell, as a metaphor, not as a real thing. Oh, it turns out that I think we've mentioned the publisher Antelope Hill Publishing before. Do you remember Antelope Hill?
Not specifically.
Okay. Antelope Hill is a explicitly white nationalist publishing house.
Sorry, is it? Are you saying Antelope Hill?
Antelope Hill, yes.
Antelope Hill, right. Okay.
Antelope Hill. So, Daniel, why is it called something as silly as Antelope Hill?
That was going to be my next question.
I cannot answer that question. I don't think they've ever described it. They don't have it on their about page or anything like that. But I would ask you, what else starts with the words AH?
Yeah. Yeah.
There might be some person that's really well associated with far right movements with the initials AH. I'm just curious. I'm just asking questions.
It could be. Yeah, just asking questions. Yeah.
I am almost certain that's where the name comes from. Anyway, if it was not, they would have some explanation for it on their webpage. That's all I'm going to say. They are an explicitly white nationalist publisher, and they are doing a...
Maybe it stands for assholes.
Yes, that's possible. That's possible. The only thing I can think of is like some family lore where there was a hill with a bunch of antelopes on it, and they just named it after a family crest or something. I don't. It's possible. I'm just going to say that the fact that it has the same initials as Adolf Hitler, that is not a factor that did not influence what this publishing house is doing. Anyway, they're kind of uninteresting. There's some lore behind them. They act like they're kind of a major kind of independent publisher. They're ramping up in production. It turns out to be like a married couple, and they've abused one of their employees, and there's some reporting for a few years on that. I'm not really interested in that today. If you want a full episode on Antelope Hill, we'll do a full episode on Antelope Hill. It's fine. I can do it, but I'm not interested in that today. They are releasing sorry, I got it in front of me. They're releasing a reprint of a long out of print book by David Irving. And apparently they had to reach out to the family, and they reached out to Irving to get the rights for it. They described this in a podcast I listened to. And it's called Nuremberg, the Last Battle. So it's David Irving's, kind of revisiting of the Nuremberg trials. And so David Irving comes up. David Irving, he's, and of course I was listening to the Political Cesspool, as I do every week. And well, I've got a quick clip for you. So you remember the Political Cesspool? We covered them a long time ago, but they're kind of a neo-Confederate podcast. They've been drifting more and more towards overt, Hitlerism lately, over the last year or two, as the culture just moves with them. I think they were always there, but they knew how to hide it a little bit better. And now it's like every episode, it's like, Jewish influence and power, Jewish influence and power. It's like, yeah, God, this is the most boring fucking podcast. But, I listen to it every week. So, it's just part of my penance. I must have done something terrible in a previous life, right? I'm a reincarnated SS guard or something. Anyway. So, and James Edwards, again, I suffer through this, so you get to listen to this. But so James Edwards, whenever he starts talking about David Irving, and whenever he talks about like David Duke, he brings up like Black Klansman. And how that's an A-list movie. And then whenever he brings up, David Irving, he has to talk about this Hollywood movie that was made in 2016. It's like this big production and everything. And he has one thing to say about the casting. Rachel Weisz plays Deborah Lipstadt. He has one thing to say every fucking time anybody talks about this movie on the right. They have one thing to say.
That was a movie that came out about 10 years ago now, Denial. And I don't know, Taylor, of anybody else who... adjacent to our cause who has received a treatment like that from Hollywood. I mean, that was an A-list film. Of course, the narrative is pro-Jewish, but it leads you to believe, of course, certain conclusions. But I think it's important to watch these movies. I've seen that movie a couple of times. They cast.
You notice how carefully he's talking around that. Like anyway. We'll talk about that in a minute. I just want to get to the end of this clip, but.
Timothy Spall in the role of David Irving in that movie, and he did a wonderful job, frankly. Interestingly, creative casting for the role of Deborah Lipstadt, Rachel Weisz played her, and Rachel Weisz is a gorgeous woman.
Suppose they didn't have Pamela Anderson.
Lipstadt is certainly, they did her a favor in that casting, that's for sure. But she's an Academy Award winner, and then Tim Wilkinson plays in that. He's an Academy Award nominee. The point is, everybody takes interest in David Irving, and Hollywood has certainly taken interest in him, and that movie revolves around his libel trial in the early 2000s.
They always say this about the casting of Rachel Weisz. It's like, well, she's playing that old hag, and they hired an extremely attractive, non-Jewish woman to play. It's like, it's a Hollywood movie. They hired an attractive actress. This is how Hollywood works. This is how Hollywood has worked since the 1920s, if not before. What are you talking about? Yeah. It's like, they can't portray their Jewish selves as ugly, as twisted as they really are. They have to, they can't have some hag up there. They've got to have like a beautiful woman. And, I looked it up, Rachel Weisz was about the same age as Lipstadt was at the time of the trial. at the time the movie was made. She's a few years younger.
Mhm.
I looked up photos. I mean, I was just curious. What did Lipstadt, does not a Hollywood actress, but and was a few years older. But I saw pictures from the trial. I mean, she looks like a perfectly attractive 50-year-old woman. I mean, again, we have our issues with Deborah Lipstadt, but the fact that she's some like hideous crone is not like, it's just not on the list. But of course these guys are Nazis, and so that's just the language they have to use every single time.
This is just what movies do. Movies cast pretty people. They do it with Nazis. Schindler's List, right? They cast Ralph Fiennes as Amon Gert, the commandant of the Pladshov concentration camp. Have you seen photographs of Amon Gert?
Sure.
They did a real favor.
Hollywood almost always does that. That's just how Hollywood works. Everybody, I've known people who've worked in the film industry, and it's like, working in a film is like, you sit there, it's like a small manufacturing job. You're sitting in building sets all day. You're putting cameras in place. You're doing all the, and then for 5 minutes a day, 2 supermodels walk in and talk at each other for a few minutes. That's just every Hollywood production is just like that. It just is. That's what movie stars are like.
We talked in the last bonus episode. We talked about the movie Conspiracy. They cast Kenneth Branagh as Reinhard Heydrich and Stanley Tucci as Adolf Eichmann.
Yes.
Was that one of the other Nazis was Colin Firth? I mean, what are we even talking about here?
It's just what they do. But of course, it has to be a conspiracy. It has to be this thing that Jews are secretly trying to associate young, attractive, non-Jewish women with Deborah Lipstadt because they don't want you to know how hideous she really was. It's like, I know, it's stupid.
Because, of course, if you saw a photograph of the real Deborah Lipstadt, then there's no way you'd actually sympathize with her for, exposing a Holocaust denier. You'd be on the...
But you notice how, like, the thing of where he's having to talk through, he's like, well, the movie reaches certain conclusions, and then he kind of says a big pause, and it's like, and it doesn't, but he says he's watched it multiple times. Like, he's a fan of the movie. I mean, what does that mean about the way the movie was? And what does that mean about how this cultural product exists? Is I think the question that I want to ask and not answer just yet. But that's something that really started to interest me. Was he's talking about that, and then I saw the movie, and then we had our criticism of the movie. But like that's a really important question that really talks also to what we do. And I am definitely open to criticism on this. So, but let's continue. But that's what James Edwards had to say. And the point of I use the institute quote because, the point he's making is like, well, this is a big, expensive Hollywood movie. And of course, David Irving is such a scholar. He's such an important person that even people who hate him, think of him as a truly important person that's worth making a Hollywood movie about. And if you believe that, I've seen a lot of movies about people who are not exactly stellar examples of human achievement. Let's just put it that way.
Well, I mean, there's being somebody who's important enough to make a movie about, and the movie isn't really about him anyway. But and then there's being somebody that a movie portrays positively. That movie does not portray David Irving positively. Well, that's not the point of that movie. The point of that movie is not that David Irving is this great guy. I have my issues with the movie, but it manages not to. Let's get
it. I think this is the perfect place to say this. Then there is a reading in which it does. There is a reading in which the Holocaust on Trial sides with David Irving. There's a reading of it. The movie, the Hollywood movie, we'll talk about that one first. I mean, but they both do it, portray accurately. David Irving he chose to represent himself. He's up against a brilliant scholar, a Jewish scholar for that matter, with a team of lawyers from a publishing house that they spent millions and millions of dollars in 5 years defeating this David Irving character. And, so it's like the big publishing company, the big guys, and they're just beating up on this little David Irving who, never went to college, who taught himself German, who taught himself all this, who became a very respected scholar. And then when he reached conclusions they didn't like, they kicked him out of their stuff. They call him a racist. They call him the equivalent of being called a pedophile is kind of what Irving says in one of the movies.
It is like being called a wife beater, a pedophile. It is a verbal yellow star.
And ultimately, what Irving says is, look, they don't have the documentary evidence does not say what they say it does. The documentary evidence, we don't have the blue cyanide in the walls. We don't have all that, and everybody in this movie admits that the way how the Holocaust happened is not through that, but through all this other documentary evidence. Well, if you believe Irving is correct, if you believe that Irving is actually right about this, it's very easy to believe, well, of course, those are all just fake documents. That's all just a bunch of Jewish flim flam, etc. It's very easy to kind of see that. Like, the Holocaust on trial, presents us like, well, this building has been destroyed, but then it gives us like the CGI like walkthrough of like, this is what it was. And it's like, that's just a fucking drawing. I don't know that existed. How do I know that it existed? Of course, if you read all the documents and you spoke German, you spoke years of this, you would know that it existed. That's unquestionably true. That you cannot reach another conclusion. Honestly, that's what the trial finds. But it's very easy to just reject all that and go like, no, Irving's the little guy, or Irving's the David, and the Jews are the Goliath, and he tried to make a civil action against them to gain his reputation back, and they crushed him. That's exactly it's very easy, and it's very easy to watch that movie and come to that conclusion. You and I are very.
Well, if you go in determined to do that, I mean, I don't think that's the fault of either text. To be honest.
I agree with you on that. Okay, I agree with you on that, because ultimately they portray accurately kind of what's going on, but it does make us wonder. Well, should we tell these stories? How is there a way of doing it that doesn't do that? I think is kind of the question. And I think this podcast does a good job, but like, we do not highlight the works of these guys. We do not go places that we do not make it comfortable for them. We've never invited them on. We never will invite them on. I play brief clips and then couch them in a lot of context. We don't link directly to their materials, although I might have to do that today for a different reason. But, again, I'm not expecting, like, it's just, to me, it's an interesting question of like, even with these works, which are explicitly designed to tell David Irving as a flim-flam artist is a piece of shit, it is very easy to come, again, I know how they think. I was watching the movies and I'm like, yeah, no, of course they like this movie. It's very easy to come to that conclusion. And I don't know. I don't think it's on the part of the filmmakers. I just like, I don't know. What do we do with that? I think there's a big question that's been going on in like kind of media studies and sort of, kind of news coverage. It's like, what do we do about misinformation? When you have people that are like just willfully unable to be reached on topics. And this is like, it goes much larger than the Holocaust, of course, but there's all, I listened to Megyn Kelly and Jack Posobiec and Charlie Kirk, and they're just feeding lies all day long about like what's going on in the Trump White House. And like, how do you combat that? Even for people who don't listen to it as many hours a day as I do, people just believe it casually. And then, suddenly the Russiagate was just a hoax the whole time. And it's just like created by Obama and Hillary Clinton and it was the deep state and everything. And it's not like, and Epstein was never, it's just, you create this alternate world, you create it to such a fidelity that it's very easy to get in there. And then any cultural product that goes against that like narrative, any culture, no matter how skillfully produced, by definition, it's just going to be either dismissed or viewed through that lens. And like and especially with something like Holocaust now, where people have spent like 40 years figuring out how to deny the Holocaust. There are like hundreds of thousands of, not hundreds of thousands, there are like thousands of books written from a denier perspective that look on the surface, always on the surface, like very detailed technical treatises on these topics. And somebody with an interest in this topic, I couldn't approach that material and immediately tell you why it's wrong. You need another scholar to do that. And so then it looks like, well, you just have these two scholars at a very high level having a legitimate academic debate. That's the whole point of Irving's career. And he lost a lot based on this trial. He lost the trial, but they're still republishing his books. They're still he's still very well respected in those spaces. Like
in those spaces, yeah,
right. Yeah.
I think one of the things that the TV docudrama gets across better than the film is the extent to which, and this is really more fundamentally, this is what this is about. This trial wasn't about Deborah Lipstadt fundamentally. It wasn't even fundamentally about the Holocaust. What it was about was the fact that this guy, David Irving, was not a historian. He was a falsifier of history. And This is what Professor Evans, this is the great service that Professor Evans did when he went into this and he produced his report for the trial and then turned it into his book. He documents in pitiless, merciless detail the extent to which Irving falsifies the evidence, falsifies the facts, lies, omits, distorts, mistranslates. And Evans also at the start of the book, he goes through the public perception of Irving versus the reality. One of the things, and he's quite acerbic on the journalism around the case as well. He's acerbic about the fact that the journalists commenting on it talk about it as if Irving is the defense. as if he is the one who is being picked on, as if he is the one who is being sued, as if he's on trial, because they haven't properly assimilated what's going on. And they're repeating the standard view of Irving that they've heard from other people, that he's a respected historian who's got a reputation for discovering new documents and stuff like this. And he exposes that as Irving's narrative, that this guy has no formal qualification as a historian. He doesn't have a PhD. He doesn't have, a professorship anywhere or tenure. He doesn't have, he doesn't actually discover new documents or burrow around in archives more than any other research historian.
Right.
Stuff
Exactly.
like this. Evans exposes this whole thing for just a mirage. And I think that the TV docudrama doesn't concentrates on the idea of the Holocaust, denial of the Holocaust, and the historicity of the Holocaust. Absolutely, because that's, from the point of view of the documentary makers, that's the most important thing. And of course, in terms of history and politics, of course, it is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
But what the trial was actually about, as I say, was the fact that this guy is a fraudster. He's a neo-Nazi fraudster.
It wasn't enough to show he was a Nazi. You could easily, you could say, well, he's just allowed to believe that, because
they had to show that Lipstadt was correct and not being defamatory when she said that about him, which they did.
So they have to show not that he is a Nazi, not that he believes odious things, although it is important to show that he believes odious things, but also that he was falsifying the documents, he was falsifying the stuff. And again, lying about Hitler gets deep into the weeds on this, goes into particular lines where he's, omitting certain things. And, again, this could be an easy mistake to make where Irving is not accomplished in the German language as he is. He is well respected as being as a native speaker of German as you can be and not actually be a native. He is incredibly fluent in German.
And also there's a pattern of it. He's constantly mistranslating. And the mistranslations are always in the favor of Hitler.
Exactly. And that's the nub of what really the movie could have been about, is it is about how he's a falsifier of history, not just a Nazi. And so, I think it's worth seeing, particularly the TV film. I think is worth seeing. If you want the Hollywood version, I think it's fine. It's annoying, but it's fine. But the movie I want to see is Herzog looking at lying in the documents. That's the movie I want. You can even have the exact same cast, but
on the deeper point, I kind of agree. These were kind of the debates that people put up around this at the time. They were saying, shouldn't you just ignore it? Because by going after Irving, which of course, as Richard Evans points out, wasn't what was happening. They weren't picking on him. They weren't going after him. They couldn't just ignore it. She and Penguin Books had been accused of defamation. But the idea was, you shouldn't do this. Essentially, people were saying you shouldn't defend yourself against this accusation because you'll be platforming him. And well, you need to establish the actual record. We've talked about this on previous episodes. There was a point in time where and I know that you this is true of you as well, I believed a version of the conspiracy theory around the JFK assassination. When I was much younger, I believed that. Yep. And at that time, no amount, partly because of that fucking movie, and at the time, no amount of non-conspiracy history writing about it could have convinced me otherwise, because I was in that conspiracy-brained headspace. But what allowed me eventually to climb out of it was the presence of good arguments elsewhere. Yes. They were there for me to find. I wasn't ready to accept them at the time when I was 20 years old, but they were there for me to find when I became ready to go out and seek them. And I think that's the service that is done by combating stuff like this in this forum, which is that it puts the reality on the record. It's there for people who are willing to see it.
Yeah, and making it Richard Evans writing the book is an important thing. I think everybody who listens to this show should read that book. It's a brilliant book.
It's a brilliant book. Yeah.
I don't do a lot of book recommendations just because I don't read that many books these days, but
basically
that's a great book.
Everything Evans wrote. He wrote an excellent book recently called The Hitler Conspiracies, where he talks about 5 conspiracy theories centering around the issue of the Nazis and the Third Reich. That's a great book. He wrote a 3-volume history of the Third Reich as a whole, which is, I haven't read all of it, but the stuff that I've read of it, basically the first volume, is very good indeed.
You sent me, you obtained a copy of this and then sent me that copy through very legal means, of course. And yes, everybody sees through this. It's fine.
The TV docudrama, you mean?
The TV docudrama, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because and so I did watch the version you sent me, and then I was like looking for something else, and I was like, let's see if this is findable online. YouTube found it, the whole 90-minute version, found it instantly. It's like the first link on YouTube. It was right. It was fine. It was
when I looked for it on YouTube, I only found the cut down 50-minute version. Oh, that's good.
No,
I found the whole thing's on YouTube.
Oh! You're gonna bite those. You're gonna bite your tongue a little bit. Guess what? The channel it's on that it hosted the whole thing.
Oh,
the channel called Irving Books. It includes also the entire 45-minute thing that Irving filmed when he confronted Lipstadt and at the talk, and other David Irving materials. This is an Irving fan posting this documentary or this docudrama or whatever.
Well, that is bizarre.
Because they think it exonerates him. That's what I'm saying. They think it exonerates him.
Yeah.
Like on that topic, I have another clip. This one is not related. This one, I was going to do this as a kind of a roundup thing, but we're coming at this a different way. And we're kind of talking about how these guys kind of use their media appearances and how they talk about their media appearances. And in a previous episode, I think the most recent numbered episode, or maybe in the most recent news roundup, we do a lot of episodes and I can't keep them straight anymore. But we talked about the Mehdi Hasan Jubilee appearance, right?
That was a news roundup, yeah.
That was a news roundup. Okay. So we talked about the Mehdi Hasan Jubilee. And you talked about this guy, Connor, who was Pine Sap. And I found out Pine Sap had been on Elisha Schaefer's show. He did a full appearance there. He is very much a Dick Fuentes acolyte, et cetera, et cetera. And I said to you, because I had only watched it one time and I hadn't gone through and looked at a bunch of the other clips at that point, and it wasn't really kind of relevant to what we were talking about, that he was not the worst one. He was not nearly the worst one because I watched the whole thing and you didn't. And I said, there's backwards hat guy. And if you've seen the thing, if you've even seen clips, you've seen the guy with the green baseball hat. It's on backwards. He's got like tousled hair. Went up twice and he was actually the last person to speak before the like kind of the 10-minute end debate thing. So he had kind of the final word. Well, let's just say, if you remember when we talked about James Alsop, I said, and then Alsop went on Fascination for a while, and I said that James Alsop never wanted to be Richard Spencer. He wanted to be Jazz McFields. He just like eats every word that man says and regurgitates it at him. Well, this guy, he goes by Doomernaut on Twitter or on Substack. He may be on Twitter, but they linked to his Substack. I will now read to you the title, like he is the #1 A-logger of the kosher right. And the first two articles as of this time are about this guy, Nathan Koftis, who refutes Kevin McDonald through using other evolutionary psychology methods. So he's like a right-wing eugenicist dipshit who believes it's actually because the Jews are just naturally better at being humans that they end up in, high positions of authority, rather than being because of they have some in-group strategy, it's just because we're better, because, eugenics is right, etc. So in defense of Koftis in defense of McDonald over Koftis, because he believes, as the Nazis do.
Kevin McDonald, by the way, testified for David Irving at the libel trial.
I'm not digging the movie for this, but I have listened to many hours of Kevin McDonald speak. I know very much what that actor did not sound anything like Kevin McDonald. It's fine. Nobody knows what Kevin McDonald. I know what Kevin McDonald sounds like. It's not a problem. It's just like Kevin McDonald has a very particular way of speaking, and it's just I didn't even twig that it was Kevin McDonald at first. I'm like, oh, that's okay. That's supposed to be Kevin McDonald. I get it. But I mean, the Substack is titled, that one white populist. Like this is explicitly white nationalist material. YouTube, the Jubilee channel, when it linked to everybody's social media, they linked to this Substack on that where 10 million people have seen it. So anyway.
Yeah. Right. Thanks.
Dubernaut really wanted to be, he wants to be Mike Enoch more than Mike Enoch wants to be Mike Enoch, I think, at this point. He's a huge fan. And apparently, I think they were in contact, like behind the scenes on Twitter, or something like. Maybe he's probably on the forums. He's, anyway. I didn't look deeply into this. Dubernaut went on the Daily Show, episode 1,368, and yes, there have been 1,360. Actually, a few more now because this is like a week and a half old. But this is Dubernaut talking about the. You're just going to get to hear him chat with Mike Enoch. So apologies for making a list to any amount of Mike Enoch. It's only 40 seconds long, but But also he's talking a little bit about the selection process, like how he got on Jubilee.
They reached to my friend and they were like, you know way more about politics than I do. And they were like, and she's more of like a normie kind of. She's right wing, but she's more of a normie. And she was.
He means not a white nationalist, probably.
Like, you should apply, and I'll throw in a word for you. And I applied, and they really liked my application. I was interviewed on a Zoom call by the producer, and then they set me up.
So
pretty simple, actually. It's way easier than people think it actually is. And they don't really reimburse you, which is they're probably looking for people to come own. So it's actually probably pretty easy to get own at.
It's really hard to be any more damning about the Jubilee process at this point than listening to that 40-second clip, right?
Yeah.
I'm an open Nazi. They interviewed me. I probably told them I was an open Nazi. They linked to my Nazi Substack because they're not paying people. Who do they think they're going to get with this stuff? We want far-right conservatives to come and debate somebody. We want somebody who's itching for that little inch of fame, who really wants to get out there and make viral clips. This is, again, it's exactly... But again, this is how these guys defend. He thinks he won. Like, if you want to, we could do an episode about this Daily Show episode. You go through all the things that, every time that Mehdi Hasan did what I think Mehdi Hasan is right to do is look, I have made these particular claims. I want you to debate this claim. And he's like, no, I don't want to debate that claim. I want to debate the Jews. I want to debate, I want to debate other things. I'm not interested in Donald Trump, etc. He wants to bring it he wants to do Mike Enoch's rhetoric at Mehdi Hasan. That's what he wants to do. And Mike Enoch, in his discussion of debates, he's always like, well, no, you don't let them make their points. You ask them about Jews. You ask them about Jewish influence. You ask them about this. Do not talk about any other time. No, we are not talking about, we are talking about Gaza. We are talking about, et cetera. We are talking about these topics. This is all we're talking about. This is all I'm going to be here to debate you. And I refuse to discuss anything else. And so, and in the turn of the online blood sports era, that's a really effective technique because people are not as trained as Mehdi Hasan is, and they're not able to come in there with an arsenal of facts and going I'm not here to discuss it. I'm here to discuss this. I mean, ultimately they're kind of doing the same thing. They're just and it's very clear in Mehdi Hasan's other things. And I rewatched a couple of those clips with Jubilee just to kind of get them in my head again. It's very clear Mehdi Hasan realizes he's talking to a Nazi very, very quickly, and he just doesn't say so. He understands. He gets it. I really wish he just said it.
They're always going to think that they won, though, aren't they?
Or at least
whatever happens.
Hold on. At least they're going to pretend that they won in public. That's the thing.
Yes.
They're going to come out and they're going to say, well, of course, I wiped the floor with him, etc. Just the one kid. There was the one kid who tweeted, he didn't get to go up, and he said, he did a screenshot of himself sitting there in his chair. It's I didn't want to go up because Mehdi Hasan spelled terrible. And it's you didn't even get to talk. You're trying to you're a little pathetic. I won by not going up there and debating Mehdi Hasan. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. That's just
just
cope, obviously, and racism.
And this is something, and again, this may sound like self-defensive. This may sound like a thing, but I have been critical lately of my decision not to do an episode kind of talking about the ongoing genocide in Gaza, not doing early in 2023 or 2024 early on, or even I thought about doing something like how the Nazis are talking about this topic, right? And kind of doing that. I was dissuaded from doing so by a wiser head, but and I'm just I just don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this episode, given what we do. And the thing, and I've said this to you privately, and I'm going to say it here on the podcast, just I feel really bad about that. But in my head, this is why. Because the first thing they're going to do is the famous anti-fascist podcaster, this guy who knows us inside and out, who disagrees with everything we believe in, also thinks the Jews are doing terrible things in Gaza. He doesn't say they're Jews. He says it's the Israeli government, but he knows they're fucking Jews. And then the idea of having my words used against me in that context, that made me go away from doing that topic. And, maybe that was cowardice on my part. Maybe I should not have made that decision, but that's my answer to that. You can respond to that or not.
I think that's the right decision. I mean,
okay.
I'm not going to tell you how to feel, but I think that was absolutely the right editorial decision. I think we did talk about this, and there were sort of structural problems with our remit as a show that made it very difficult to find a way to cover it in a way that was more full and focused, that just were kind of inescapable. I mean, I think you made the right call personally.
Okay,
and I'll stand by that call.
I'm open to criticism on that basis. Although Jack will probably get the criticism. That's what we find out. People just reach out to Jack. I think what Daniel did is unconscionable. I can't believe you're still a podcast with him, etc. I think a really interesting. This is a sideline, but I think it fits into this. There was a great episode of Polite Conversations with the title "Can Genocide Studies Survive a Genocide in Gaza?" And it's at with an author, Mary Cohen, who is at Mari Cohen, I'm not sure, at the Jewish Currents, and Cohen wrote a really great, very long but really great article with the same title, and it's about how you mentioned the ADL earlier. It's about how particularly sort of like the field of genocide studies has been so focused on the Holocaust, so focused on like Lipstadt, on the treatment of the Jewish Holocaust as being like in some way unique, and that criticism of Israel is like denying the Jewish people their sanctum after the events of the Holocaust. There's this like very legitimate feeling in some circles about that, and that these organizations, that these scholars, and that these organizations have refused to make statements, as they very well should have made statements about what's going on, about the ongoing genocide or ethnic cleansing, however whichever term you prefer, about the ongoing genocide in Gaza, because they are reticent to reach that, to upset people in that way. And it's a great article. I have a quote, but I didn't quote it here. I'll just kind of describe the article. Listen to that conversation. It's a great conversation. Look at that article. And the reason I wanted to bring it up here is because it also fits into that same question. Is like, well, how do you cover this? Like, how do we, I mean, I'm not standing the ACL, the ADL. I'm not in any way defending the ADL here. The ADL is a monstrous organization on this topic. There's just, the ADL should be front and foremost of, criticizing, and I think like people like Jewish Voices for Peace, etc., are essential voices because they are Jewish, and yet they do very strongly criticize the actions of the Israeli government in Gaza in the strongest terms, probably not the strongest terms, but you know what I mean. There's no equivocation whatsoever on that.
Unsparing, yeah.
And I think it's, for me, this is all like it's all this kind of like failure of actors in this space to actually reach conclusions and to actually, have the gumption to go about and like say what needs to be said and, like call it out whenever it needs to be called out. I mean, look, you and I think I defended myself on this topic earlier. You and I have spared no bones about complaining about, the US government and the UK government. We tore Biden over the coals on many occasions over all the failures that he had, and we would have done that to Kamala Harris as well. There's absolutely no, we see these things clearly, and we don't mince words when we talk about them, except for legal reasons, of libel reasons, etc. You have more to worry about there than I do, but again,
well, my government is basically just made being in solidarity with Palestine illegal. So
yeah, well, mine is getting there. Mine is getting there.
Yeah.
And God, that's actually the thing that the Nazis hate Trump for the most. It's like we love everything except his stance on Israel. He's not harsh enough on Israel. Like he's too, like they love him on everything, but it's the Israel is like the turd in the punch bowl. It's like we love the punch bowl, but why does there have to be this turd floating in it? Yeah, no, again, to me, it's like it was part of the same process, the process that kind of brought me to kind of talking about this. How do we talk about this? What do we say? What do we do? This is not to say we are blameless. This is not to say, like it's just these organizations, we have to be able to call this stuff out where it is, and we need to be honest about it. You and I use humor. We use, we're a small show, and we use, we use the techniques that we have to talk about this stuff. We are not beholden to the budget of a, Denial was made for $10 million. They could have been a lot more radical and gotten that $10 million, But I don't know. I think there's just a responsibility for how we talk about these things. And that's what interested me. And I don't have a good answer for this. But I wanted to kind of pose the question.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said about the idea that the Holocaust is unique. I think it is unique in some respects. I'm kind of reluctant to say that because so many of the people that say that are doing so for reasons that I disagree with, or even using the idea of the uniqueness or the incommensurability of the Holocaust, for political. I mean, let's just say it: the Holocaust is weaponized,
yes,
ideologically by people to defend the state of Israel or to deflect criticism of the state of Israel, or, that's a fact. And that is completely reprehensible. And the idea of the categorical uniqueness of the Holocaust is often used in that way. I think nonetheless, it's true to say that it was unique in some respects. I think every historical event of that kind is unique in some respects. I think it's worth, it's worth pointing out the fact that it is categorically unique in some ways. But I do think a lot of them, just even aside from the question of the weaponization of the Holocaust as a topic to silence or deflect or blacken a criticism of Israel, even aside from that, so much of how we talk about the Holocaust in our culture is just morbid and salacious, and frankly, it's been commodified to a huge extent. And I think kind of my meta complaint about stuff like denial is that it is part of a kind of a commodification of this topic, for sort of selling a kind of sentimental media version of it, which I find pretty distasteful.
As was Schindler's List.
Schindler's List. I absolutely agree. Yeah. On the question of Irving and what the value is of combating people like him, I think it's worth pointing out that we have this guy now, Darryl Cooper, who Mother Jones did an article recently about this, which is very good, I think, and it points out the guy is Darryl Cooper. We've covered him in a previous episode in passing, anyway. I
used to listen
X.
to his podcast. I used to listen to Martyr Made, but I haven't listened to that in a long time.
Martyr Made. That's exactly. He on X, he has hundreds of thousands of followers, one of whom is JD Vance. He was interviewed by Tucker Carlson and praised by Tucker Carlson. He's the biggest history blog on Substack, chillingly. Substack, which just recently sent out a push notification to people for a blog which was just openly anti-Semitic. And he was on Rogan, and Rogan has said, oh, there's no way this guy's anti-Semitic. This guy is an anti-Semitic Holocaust denier. And it is frightening how much he is like David Irving. I'll just read a little bit from this Mother Jones article. It's talking about the fact that one of Darryl Cooper's things is that he likes to attack Winston Churchill. Now, again, I'm no apologist for Winston Churchill. David Irving did that as well. David Irving wrote a book about how he decided that Winston Churchill had the Polish leader, General Sikorski, assassinated, which, as far as I can tell, is complete bollocks. This is Darryl Cooper thing as well. And from this article, he says, he's talking about Churchill being primarily responsible for the Second World War because of his alleged ties to financiers and a media complex supportive of Zionism. He later specified that his source for this claim was David Irving, an infamous British anti-Semite and Holocaust denier. Irving, who also lacks formal training as a historian, because Darryl Cooper, no formal training. Irving, who also lacks formal training as a historian, has been discredited for decades. In 1991, after denying the existence of gas chambers at Auschwitz, he used the acronym ASSHOLES to refer to the Auschwitz survivors of the Holocaust, and other liars. And it talks a bit about the case that we've just been talking about. And then it goes, again, it talks a little bit about Richard Evans debunking his work and so on. And it shows Cooper is not just drawing on Irving. He's also misrepresenting Irving by downplaying. He's recycling Irving's arguments while downplaying his anti-Semitism, rephrasing his arguments so that they sound less openly outrageous. Here's a bit. In Cooper's telling, Irving believed that gas chambers were not a primary method of killing. That's a quote at Nazi death camps. Irving put it more bluntly, I'm a gas chamber denier. So he's laundering Irving as he repeats his talking points. He's also Mother Jones actually got the historian Richard Evans to respond to some of this, and he responded by email. Cooper is not just misrepresenting Irving, he's misrepresenting Irving's criticisms of Irving, Evans's criticisms of Irving, making it sound that Evans is less critical. So we have this guy who's now the biggest, he's a star Holocaust denier on X and Substack and Joe Rogan and podcasts and Tucker Carlson. And he is not just very, very much like David Irving, he is directly using Irving's arguments and laundering him.
I mean,
So
I would argue Irving invented that like alt-right attitude, yeah, in some ways. He may not have invented it, but I remember when we did our original episode on this, I found like some old like YouTube clips of like when Irving came to the States in either 85 or 86. I think my sources differed, so I don't remember if it was 85 or 86, but he gave some talks to some conferences, and he does the racist jokes. He does the like plausibly denial, but not really plausibly denial thing about race.
Yeah.
He does the, African people are just stupid. He plays all the hits. He sounded exactly like Richard Spencer in 2016, and he did it 30 years earlier. Even the bit we see this in the Denial movie, the fact that he does this stunt, he has somebody in the audience to ask about him, and he comes in and it's like, I'm David Irving, and he films the whole thing, and he like puts it up in his, it's like, it's just so, he's just so born. He was born 30 years early for this era.
Yeah.
But he kind of invents this stuff in a lot of ways. He's just the progenitor of it.
But luckily, he's got
like
this
David
little,
Duke,
he's got this little avatar in the form of Darryl Cooper.
As that's what happens. He's just, I mean, look, David Irving lost the trial, but he kind of like he's winning. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The trial didn't stamp out his ideas. The movie didn't stamp out his ideas. We didn't stamp out his ideas. He's still there.
Certain people can still watch that movie and apparently that documentary as well and say, yeah, that's my guy. He looks good in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's because they're determined to. It's because they're deliberately reading those texts against the grain, but they're still doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, bit of an anticlimax there, but I don't know. This was a bit of a difficult one to get together and plan and assemble. So
I was just gonna talk about the 2016 movie for 45 minutes. It was gonna be fine just to get some content out there, and then we just it turns out when you step into Holocaust denial, you're just stepping through shit all the time. Anyway, so let us know how you feel about what we discussed here. If you want to hear us do the Sydney Sweeney, we could do the Sydney Sweeney episode. If you want to hear us do the episode of The Daily Show with Doom or Not, and I can walk through all the little rhetoric pitches, that's just it'd be really annoying to do, but I can do it. It's not easy. It's not hard. That's that's an hour and a half of content just to clip through and find clips and talk through it. That's easy to do. So if you want to hear those, I don't think it's important enough. I don't think the topics are important enough for us to cover them, but if you want to hear them, I'm happy to produce them.